His name is above, His name is above depression. His name is above loneliness. Oh, His name is above disease. His name is above cancer. His name is above every other name. Listen to this. That is who you are. That is who you are. Jesus. And that is who you are. Oh, I know that is who you are.
change. Good afternoon. Hey, I want to invite those who are joining us online. I guess I'm going to join you. Many of you are joining us online, and then we have many with us in the room. We're excited about today. If you've been watching the news at all in the last few weeks, and I would even say in the last few months, you've seen the increased sensitivity. In fact, more than that, I have lost sleep over the tragic video that came out just, I guess, a week and a half ago now with George Floyd. I've grieved watching that video and wondered, how do I respond? How do I respond as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus to what we saw? But this isn't a new issue, right? This is an issue that has been in our country for over 400 years. And not only that, if you read the Bible, it was very present in Scripture. This is a gospel issue. And so as I've been asking God, how do we respond to this? I've been prompted in several different ways. One, that I feel like we need to pray. Second thing, that we need to listen. And the third is to love people. And so we've been praying, we've been seeking God in this. Leroy and our team have been helping speak into this. And I've been trying to listen. And then I thought it would be really good if we could spend time together listening to each other. And so today was really born out of that. Leroy was like, hey, what if we did a town hall where we gave the opportunity for people in the room to come forward and share? We'll have a 2-minute limit. I'm going into the format that Leroy's going to explain here in just a second. And then to put people up on the stage that have different perspectives, that have seen different things. And then we're going to help focus this time, we're going to bring up our Police Chief Connolly, and Leroy on our team are going to have a dialogue about what God has been doing. I say God has been doing. Leaders in our church community have been doing, but I think God's been working through that in really neat ways. But how do we respond? So what today really is a prompting for us to listen, and to listen well to each other. So y'all bow with me, and I want to pray, and then we will get rolling. Father, I pray in the name of Jesus, through the power of the Holy Spirit, that you would use this time. I pray that this would be helpful. God, I ask that as we listen to each other, that you would change hearts, that you would help us, that you would teach us. God, we know that you care deeply about racial reconciliation. It's all over Scripture. And God, I pray that you would be with our words, our mouths, and then also our ears. I pray that we'd extend grace to each other. I know that no one who speaks today will say everything perfectly. And I pray that we would listen with love, and that you would really use this time to help us, God. I pray that we in this time of increased sensitivity would be prompted to increase activity in a proactive, positive way. But I don't think any of us know what that's supposed to be individually. So help us to listen well to each other during this time. In Jesus' name. As we've talked about this, we've thought it would be great to have Leroy kind of moderate this time. And so Leroy, our teaching pastor here at First McKinney, has helped put this together. And so Leroy, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead us into what's going to happen next.
Thank you, Pastor. Give Pastor Sam a hand. Those that are watching online, show him some love. Glad that you chose to join us here in the worship center. Glad you have chosen to join us online. I want to try to set a little bit of context for what we will attempt to discuss and focus on today. Right now, we are all, over the last 3 months, we have all been experiencing, first of all, a major health crisis of pandemic proportions, coronavirus. Nobody's unaware of that. But we are all still right now experiencing the consequences of that. Because of the pandemic, from a health perspective, it has also led now to an economic crisis, proportions that we've not seen since the Great Depression. Many millions have been added to the unemployment rolls. In our own church, we know that at least 60 people that we're aware of who told us have lost jobs. And on top of that, within the last 2 weeks, we've now added civil unrest like we haven't seen since the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So I want you just to pause for a moment and think about it. We are all experiencing simultaneously 3 crises that our country survived through, but they did not happen at the same time. Pandemic, proportions we haven't seen since 1918. Economic depression since the 1920s. And civil unrest that we haven't seen since the 60s. And it's all happening right now. Our goal today is not to try to solve all these problems. I'm sure you have all the answers, but we're not going to try to solve all those problems today. What we're doing in this town hall is we are zeroing in with laser focus on one dimension, and that is the dimension of law enforcement. And our goal today is to explore, to dig into law enforcement on a local level. We want to hear from you, your thoughts. And that's why we've made these mics available. In just a moment, we invite you to begin making your way to the mic, to one of these mics. We will allow those who are present a maximum of 2 minutes to make a statement, offer your thoughts, your perspectives about law enforcement. Got it? Say yes. Law enforcement. This is our focus today, law enforcement in America. After we allow time, we've allotted some 30 minutes for that. That means between 12 to 14 people who are present will actually have the opportunity to speak if you choose to. If it doesn't go that long, we'll move on to the second section. We've asked some designated people, 5 that you will hear from, as Pastor Sam said, who will speak from different perspectives about law enforcement. And once we finish that, we'll move into a section where we've invited the Chief of Police here in McKinney, Chief Greg Conley, to come and we will interview him, have a conversation, to just talk about the McKinney story, which I happen to believe is one that needs to be heard. And we're going to ask you who are watching online, you who are here in the worship center, to help get this story out because we're learning some things that can be helpful to move the needle forward with respect to law enforcement all across this nation. So with that context being set, we now move into a time of open mic. And we have two mic monitors. Our executive pastor, John Wills, will be monitoring whoever comes to this microphone. And our sports and men's minister, Rob Bowser, will be monitoring those who come to this mic. When you come, you'll turn, and because since nobody will be on the platform, you can face all who are present and those who are watching online as you make your comments. So you can move now, okay? Who wants to be the first one? Somebody has to always break the ice to make it easier for others to come. Make your way to one of these mics. 2 minutes or less, we'd like to hear from you. We're listening. Who's coming first? All right. There's the first one. Who's going to be next? Go ahead and get position. You go to the opposite mic so that we can alternate back and forth. Who's next? You come to this mic to my left and your right. Go ahead. Identify yourself and then talk to us.
Good evening. Can you hear me? My name is Dwayne Owens. I'm a member of First Baptist. The first thing I want to do is just thank you all for coming out and showing your support this evening for an issue that has been long overdue in discussion. One of the things I do is I teach workplace diversity in the corporate entity. So it's nice to see it being addressed in the church house also. But one of the things I always tell corporate entities when it comes to cultural diversity in the workplace is that solutions always begin with a dialogue. It begins with the dialogue. Until we're able to sit down and discuss it like we're doing tonight, then there are voices that are going to be out there that are just unheard. So what I wanted to do, because I can't solve anything in 2 minutes with my statement, is I just wanted to commend both pastors of the church for allowing this town hall to take place. Because I know that there are good white brothers and sisters out there that really can't understand the black plight. They really are trying to understand, but if you can't discuss it, then you can't understand it. So this forum for discussion, and I would say this to my white brothers and sisters out here, because you are my brothers and sisters. Initially in a dialogue, you have to allow for some venting. For us as African Americans, and I was born in the early 60s, you have to realize that police brutality towards black people is something we've been dealing with since the early 60s. This is nothing new to us. It's exhausting to us as a people. It's exhausting to see it on social media, and there's no accountability to certain police officers that are involved in these incidences. I have been living in McKinney for about 15 years now. I've met with Police Chief Conley at one point, and I'm very proud of the police here in McKinney. My experience has been nothing but positive with them. But I don't represent all African Americans, and there are some African Americans in McKinney who have a different story. And so we have to listen to them, and once we listen, then we can start setting in some objectives and some policies to change things. But I just wanted to commend both churches this evening for allowing this forum to take place. Thank you.
My name is Jan Temples, and I've got a story to tell you. This morning, about 6:30 in the morning, I'm out there watering my squash and my corn. And I have my little puppy with me. And this bird goes nuts. And it's screaming and hollering. And it's about 20, 25 yards from me. And I thought, well, I'm just scaring it, because I knew it had a nest on this beautiful post that I had that's about 6 foot tall. And the top of that pole has a little hole, it's a box. And I knew there was this beautiful bluebird nest in there. And this bird was screaming and screaming and screaming. So finally I told my puppy Trinket, we gotta go, we're bothering it. We go back inside, and about an hour later, I realized I had to go back because I had to water those plants. And to do that, I had to turn the faucet on that was right underneath where that bird nest was. So I told Trinket, okay, Trinket, we got to go back out there, and we're going to bother this mama, but we got to water the plants. We go out there, and as I'm turning the corner, there's just dead silence. And it kind of was a creepy feeling. And I walk by the post, and there's a snake. And the snake had eaten all the babies. And the mama's gone. That reminded me of you. You're screaming and hollering, and I didn't pay attention. What's my analogy? I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. But I just thought about it, that there was a mama screaming and hollering, and I didn't do anything. Maybe I could have saved those babies. But love you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Larry Rand. My wife, Ron, and I are fairly new members here. And I guess since no one else is talking, I'm thinking what Leroy said earlier about three things that have happened to this nation. And I think I'm beginning to believe more and more we're in a spiritual war. One thing after another. I've always really appreciated and respected our law enforcement community, but I do want to listen, and I understand the comments about African Americans who've seen the 60s and some of the strife that happened then, and even beyond. But I feel like what we've seen is kind of like the many waters of Revelation, where there are a lot of factions that are at play right now. We have groups that really want to protest and have open dialogue. We have those that I think have some other agendas to maybe see anarchy go forward in our nation, and others that probably are just common thieves that are taking advantage of a situation, and there are probably many others. But it just was a catalyst, a spark that just exploded. So I think that I really want to listen, and I'm sure that in any organization, including the police at all levels, there are some bad actors, and I think already there are policies being reviewed and thought about, but I want to just say that I do support our law enforcement. Our country depends on having a civil society where most of us try to do the right thing. We play by the rules. If we have a tipping point where too many people believe that they can do whatever they want, we lose our right to govern ourselves. So I would like to see us recognize that it's important that we're responsible as Christians, that we pray. We really need to be in prayer. And I'm happy that our police chief is here, and I want to have open ears. I hope we all are willing to listen and thoughtfully pray for change. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I've been in this church for 6 years. It's been a great place for my family to get connected to a lot of good people. My name's Tim Roos. 4 or 5 years ago, my wife and I were foster parents, and were for more than a year, and a good part of that year had 2 African-American daughters in our home. And we gave ourselves entirely to that time, to the possibility that they'd be with us forever. And had frustrations with that system, but ultimately saw it work, and they were reunited with their family. And had to say goodbye to them, and I drove them back when I said those goodbyes and said those prayers to those girls. When a news week like this one happens, and it's happened too many times, it's given me empathy that I haven't had before. And I put those daughters back out into a world that I can't do anything for them directly anymore. But show up at times like this. And what can I do but to say what kind of world I want them to have from a distance? I think of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham put Isaac on that altar, and he was in God's hands. And those are my daughters in my heart. And I want a better world for them. I can't do anything for them directly. I appreciate the church and this dialogue, and this has taken a lot for me to stand up here, but I want to put this out there for if anybody needs to hear that may I live in better empathy because of that. That's what that year did for me. And wherever those daughters are, I pray for them all the time. and they're my daughters, and I empathize with members of my African American community who put their children out in the world, and it is the way it is, and I hate it, and it's got to do better.
My name is Jason Fry, and I guess my interaction with the police has always been positive, besides the occasional ticket, I guess. But the thing that I don't understand is when I'm watching, whether it's Dallas or wherever, these little African American kids are holding signs that say, "Are you going to shoot me?" And I don't understand that, how that happens. So I've really been trying to think of, what do I need to do to make that better? And I don't know the police need to do something better. The person who thinks they're going to get shot needs to do something better. I'm kind of in the middle. How can I bridge that gap? So that's kind of why I'm here, to tell me something to do. I just don't know what to do. So.
Well, good afternoon, church. My name is Paul Cogwell. I've been attending this church since 1995. Some still come up and say, "Hey, can I help you?" But I've been coming for quite a while. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, in the projects. And growing up in the inner city, it was tough because a lot of people, you grow up with anger, you grow up with rage, you grow up with a lot of frustration and not really understanding why are you here. And I didn't really come here to speak, but I think I want to share my story with you because I think it's unique in different perspectives. You see, I grew up in Chicago, kind of, I don't want to use the word hating police, but I really didn't like them for various reasons, for what people say and for what you see on the news and for my personal interaction. The way they approach me, the way they speak with me with a voice inflection, with a command voice, talking to me like I'm an animal, or giving me orders to sit down or lay down. It all became really frustrating, so I grew up really not liking them. It led to I didn't really like command at all, so I bound to myself I never want to be a police and I never want to go in the military because I didn't like those orders. Turns out I didn't know what I was talking about. Went to the United States Army 3rd of March, 1987. Went and served this country over in Panama and Iraq and built a bridge between a lot of different people across the world. Came back and moved to McKinney, Texas and became a police officer. January 6, 1991. Thank you. What I realized I had a passion for is helping people. But it was challenging. I didn't know it because I had just came back from Iraq. And throughout my basic training, I used to respond to a disturbance, and people come to the door and say, and they close the door and call the chief of police and say, "There's somebody impersonating a police officer." I ride with police officers, and I heard officers say to me, "What's the difference between the N-word and a black person?" I'm like, I don't know. It's like, see those guys over there? Those are the N-word. I've been a witness to officers approach people in a derogatory way, in a rough way, and I witnessed it without saying anything. Fear of retaliation, fear of being part of, fear of losing my job. And when I see all these things happen on the news, not just most recent, I just wish that the country, the world would see it without a color on it and look at it from what's right and what's wrong. We have a lot of young people that's intimidated like me growing up in the inner cities. That as soon as those lights get behind you, it's an automatic fear. And then that approach that approach is the most important thing, because that's going to lead to an escalation or a compromise. But in my 15 years of law enforcement, I can share with you it's the best job I ever had, because I know I made an impact in people that I personally said, that was then, this is now. People that I put in prison got letters back from. People that was really rude, and not just Caucasian, people in general were very rude, came back and apologized and said, hey, thanks for just doing your job. It's a tough job because you're asked to be a lot of different things. In some instances, you're asked to be a social worker. In some instances, you're asked to be a preacher. In some instances, you're asked to be a friend. In some instances, you got to make a split-second decision, that everybody else get to watch out, like watch the replay and make decisions. But while you're walking up on a car and while somebody's moving around and you're asking or you're commanding them to let me see your hands, and then that person takes it as an insult, it's a scary moment right there. As soon as they get out the car and they approach you and they're not cooperating, I'm telling you, it is very scary, and you got to make a split-second decision to save yourself and others. It's not an easy task. By no means, it's not an easy task, but it is a very rewarding task. I know I went over my 2 minutes, but that's my story.
Hey guys, I'm Sean Stevens. I've been going to this church for about 15 years now. And, my story dealing with law enforcement, so I grew up in a small town outside of Philadelphia. My best friend's dad was the chief of police. And it was really cool. He was truly my second father, and got to see that. And it was white bread America. It was. We just literally had no crime, no issues whatsoever. And that was my childhood growing up. So I can't relate necessarily from a childhood standpoint to what the community today is dealing with. But as I've grown, I've gotten very passionate about walking behind and walking beside our police force. I don't know any community member who's been killed by a police officer, but I know intimately two families who have lost their daughter, Jillian Smith in Arlington back in 2010, and Greg Hunter, Denise Hunter's husband in Grand Prairie back in 2004. I know those families very well. Both those officers happen to be African American officers. So I can't say I know exactly where every side and every faction lives or where everything falls, but what I can tell you is that there's hurt on both sides, there's pain on both sides, and I don't know what I'm saying other than just people hurt all around. And systematically, my parents adopted a girl from Ghana. I have a sister who doesn't look anything like me, and her two sons, my two nephews, Nathan and James, two beautiful mixed race babies. I have a niece here in McKinney who just graduated, who's a mixed race baby child. And I say all this to say that I've been around this, and I can have one-on-one conversations with people who don't look like me. And I think it's beautiful. And we talk about institutional racism. I don't know if I'm good at institutional love. And so maybe that's my question. How do we have institutional love? I can have a one-on-one conversation. How do we have a broad conversation about this? How do we make a bigger difference? So maybe that's just my question.
So it's not unusual. Hi, I'm Gwen Arnold, and I am a member of the McKinney First Baptist Church. I need both of you. What I have to say is very short. When you see him, he's him. When you see him, see him. Don't see the color, see the man and the heart. The McKinney police needs to see the heart, not the color. Don't react because he's dark. React because of what he's done. And if he hasn't done anything to deserve your gun, put your gun, leave it in your holster. We need to stop seeing color and start seeing hearts. And that's what's wrong right now. And that's why I'm upset, because this whole thing's about a color, not a heart. It's about a color, not a man. It's about color. And it's words that people say that make you hurt so bad. See the heart. This is my brother. He loves me. This is my brother. He loves me. Do I have to choose a black brother to get respect? No, I can choose a brother. We got to get to that point.
Bless you. God bless you.
Can we give just a hand of appreciation for all those who have offered perspectives? Going to shift into our next section. I want to invite Rick Snell. Where is Rick? There he is. And Janina Armstrong, if you two would join me on the platform here. We have asked 5 people to speak from 5 different perspectives. So, Rick, if you choose that left mic, then that's your chair, according to Andrew. So you get to sit right there, okay? And we'll give you this mic, and you'll sit right there. Mrs. Armstrong. So we've asked 5 people. The first 2 are here, and they're going to speak to us from their perspectives related to law enforcement, okay? So first of all, we've asked Rick Snell. Rick, as you can see on the screen, serves as the Associate Minister of Family Sports here at First Baptist Church, McKinney, and he is also a former police officer. So Rick, talk to us, please.
Sure. First, I'd just like to say thank you. I'm typically not the individual that's up here speaking, so forgive me if I in advance if I don't have the words that Pastor Sam or Leroy do sometimes. But real quick, a history on me. I'm going to be 48 in about a week. I was born on Flag Day, 1972. So I was born and raised on the West Coast. I have an amazing wife. She's here tonight. I've been with her for 33 years now, if you can believe that. I have 3 adult children. And I'm educated. I have a degree in psychology, and I was a police officer in a town or a city, as it were, in Washington State. It's about the 4th largest city in the state. If I said it, you'd think I probably come from Canada. It's Vancouver. That's the city where I was. It wasn't in Canada. So, real quick, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm resigned as a police officer. I spent about 7 years at the Vancouver Police Department, and I don't know how to say this other than I resigned. I retired in good standing, and I had a lot of things happen in those 7 years that some people on the police department would use a rather inappropriate word, and then magnet after that, where I had a whole lot of things happen. So from that, I've learned in the experiences of coming from the law enforcement arena, the things that happen. And so my life verse that I want to tell everybody this evening is Galatians 6, 7 through 10. And it starts out by saying, don't be deceived. God cannot be mocked, and a man reaps what he sows. And so this evening, there's 2 points that I wanted to be able to talk about. And from my experiences as a former police officer. Real quick, the reason, everybody asks, why did you resign? Let me give you a quick snapshot of what that is. I don't speak with cowardice, but I was scared. Speaking to kind of what Paul was talking about earlier, I went in the hospital 3 times on duty. I was in numerous collisions with my police car. One of them was on purpose. You know, you got to use it as a tool sometimes. I get it. I was in a high-speed pursuit, about 135 miles an hour. And there was a time, and I don't know if my wife knows this, but there was a time in 2005, in the summer of 2005, when 12 days on duty, I was going to an active shooting where I was running like to the call where people were shooting at each other. And I don't know if I ever told you that or not. Not a good time to do that. Love you. All right. And so my points are this, is in policing, from my experiences, the two things that I think cannot be overlooked is a city, a state, whomever it is, cannot spend enough money ever on their hiring practices. You hire character in your police officers. You just can't forego that process. And the second one is training. And I'm not talking about training in terms of how to use your car, how to use a gun, certain types of training. And what I'm talking about is police officers nowadays need training because we are trained observers to observe one another. There are people that are hurting. And things like this occur when those people are hurting. That's the issue. I like to explain things in stories, and I don't want to take too much time, but one story, I observed a guy that was a lateral. On the department, my gut kind of told me something was wrong, but not an issue, and I didn't stand up for it. And the reason that I had numerous internal affairs on me as well, none of them held, but people complained, and one of them was for a 135 mile an hour pursuit. And the only reason that I broke policy and was the third car in that pursuit is the guy that was the second, I loved him to death, he's a good dude, but he didn't do his job, and the other people in that pursuit their lives were it wasn't safe anymore, so I had to make a decision, okay? Something was wrong, and I never said anything, and it showed itself in a crisis. The second one, basically, is I had a ride-along with my brother. And interesting, in the city where I was at, and I didn't even realize this, and self-examination as a police officer is paramount. Self-examination of who you are and where you come from is a huge deal because it expresses itself. If you hire character, that character is going to come out, like I said before. And I had my brother in the police car, and there were a lot of immigrants where I lived that were from Russia. And I said to him one time, I was going to pull a car over, and not even knowing this after years on the police department, I said, I'm going to pull over that Russian kid. I got out. He was a young man, a white man, about 19 years old, in a certain area, driving a certain car, doing whatever it was. And I got back in my police car, and my brother said, is he Russian? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, how did you know that? I mean, how would I have known that he was Russian from looking at him? And that was a key moment in my career when I realized that the things that we do as police officers, the things that we take and observe and we process, like Paul said, instantaneously from those trainings, the things that come out and the things that we say and we do, A, are always, always watched. And B is I thought to myself, I didn't realize that just saying something like that, from that moment on, that the profile that I had placed on that individual could easily be transferred to something else. And it was a powerful moment in my career to know that I couldn't do that, and I had to be that person. So basically, in closing, I'd just like to say, once again, from a perspective of somebody who's gone through a lot, those 7 years. I do get a retirement when I'm 52, so that's pretty cool, right? Hey, but the reality of it is hiring in the police department, you hire character, and you can train on the tools. But in moments of crisis, that character will absolutely come out. So I can't stress that enough to law enforcement and those people hiring. And the second is if we're trained observers, if police are trained observers, then we need to be trained to observe one another before it's too late and things happen where it gets on the news or it's a horrible thing it goes to internal affairs. You know what? That's way too late. We need to tell one another that this is the time that something needs to change in that person. And you can't train out bad. You can't train out evil. So you just got to make sure you're hiring the right folks. So, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to shift now to hear the perspective of a mom. And this is not just a mom, but this is, if you can't tell, an African American mom. So talk to us from your perspective. My wife, Miss Janina. Okay. Let's see. Is that the button, guys? Somebody come bail me out. Is it on? It's on.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I made the decision to write out what I wanted to say to you because I have a lot to say and I was only given 5 minutes, so I wanted to make each word count, okay? And this is probably going to be the toughest 5 minutes of my life, but I want to share my heart with you all, my church and my family and friends. My perspective as an African American mother. It has taken me days to formulate the words to describe the emotions I feel today. How do I describe in words the perspective I have as a Black mother, specifically as a mother of African American young men? Honestly, I thought my emotions would change over the days, but they have not. How do I feel, you ask? How am I doing, you ask? What am I thinking, you ask? How do I go on, you ask? First, how do I feel? I am miserable. I am discouraged. I'm weary. I'm tired. And I'm angry. But mostly, I am just sad. My heart is so heavy, I do not have the words. For the first time in my entire life, I am taking sleep aids to rest at night. I find it hard to get out of bed in the morning, and I am a woman who encourages other people to get out of bed in the morning. That's my job as a coach. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was brutally murdered at the hands of a law enforcement officer. We all watched it on national television. This was the day after I celebrated my 50th birthday with friends and family around the country. My friends of all walks of life and of all shades of color, mind you. I did not know George Floyd, but when George Floyd called out to his mother, not his father, but his mother, at that very moment, I was immediately summoned. If you are a mother listening under the sound of my voice, hear me. You know and understand what it sounds like when your child calls on you. Whether it is a cry or audible words, you know your child. If you are a mother you also have an internal barometer that goes up or down when the pressure increases in your environment and when your baby needs you. In fact, most mothers will tell you that barometer is affected when any child is in need. It is even a natural and human fact that a breastfeeding mother will respond when any baby cries. God just made us that way. I dare say that when George Floyd called on his mother, he summoned every mother in our country. Black, white, brown, and every shade in between. He summoned all of us. My two sons are young men. They are ages 17 and 20, soon to be 18 and 21. They have mostly grown up in predominantly white neighborhoods because despite diversity, we chose neighborhoods with the best schools. The best schools happen to be in predominantly white neighborhoods. Our responsibility as their parents was to make sure that they knew who they were despite being the minority in our neighborhoods. That meant extra readings on the Black history of our country, which, by the way, was not taught in their schools. That meant making sure we sought out other Black families through intentionally researching organizations, nonprofits that cater to African American children, and seeking out friends of friends who had kids their ages. And that meant that sometimes they would be discriminated against by some of their white friends. Moving to McKinney 5 years ago amidst the Craig Ranch incident did not give us hope. But Leroy and I took on what we felt the Lord was calling us to do. We got involved with our community and we served on boards. We serve our church and other nonprofits, and we taught our children what to do if they were ever pulled over by the police. I have gained more and more confidence in our police force since Chief Conley and my husband have built a relationship and under his leadership. I have seen change, and I am encouraged by continued change. Leroy and I are leaders and voices of unity and positive change. So then why am I still feeling discouraged and weak, you ask? Because now my children are leaving from under my wing. They're going off into this world, this country that is in complete distress. I cannot watch them every hour of the day, and I will no longer be in McKinney. They will no longer be in McKinney, where everybody knows that they are Leroy and Janina Armstrong's sons. I must trust the Lord and trust in all the things we have taught them thus far. I can still call the administration and call on government and civic leaders if something is wrong and they need my help. But understand, my reach can only go so far. That is where I am summoning all mothers, black, white, brown, yellow, all mothers, to educate your children. Teach them to love everyone. Teach them about humanity. Teach them about the Good Samaritan. You remember that story. Read it again. Look at who walked by that man in need. Look at the Good Samaritan. He was a different ethnic group, but he did not hesitate to help that man in need. Teach them that all lives matter, but right now, black lives are in danger. Teach them that hate is never an option. One day, they will have to make a choice between right and wrong, and whether to stand up for right and wrong or to be silent to right and wrong. Charity starts at home and spreads abroad. Mothers, I am challenging you today. I am challenging you to intentionally make certain that your children have friends of all colors. Invite them into your home. Invite them to eat with you. And don't invite Leroy and I to eat with you anymore, please. We've had enough to eat. But invite them to your pool parties. Talk with them. Cross over to East McKinney sometimes. Do not just stay in your bubble. Support black businesses. Show your children what it means to live in unity and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. You have been summoned.
Perspectives. Would you appreciate Rick Snell and Janina Armstrong again, please? Show them some love. Thank you, guys. The next perspective we want to hear comes from a very well-respected former pastor, theologian by the name of John Piper. Some of you may be familiar with that name. He's written several books. We thought we would invite him here, but coronavirus kept us from getting him on the plane. So, no. In reality, we're going to watch a video clip. So if our tech team has that ready, those of you that are joining us online and here in the worship center, watch this clip from John Piper.
And that sin of racism that grows in the ground of pride and self-exaltation is also undermined by this worldview. This worldview can explain the horrors of the world, and the gospel can undermine those horrors and begin to bring us free. For example, here are 4 pieces of the worldview, all of them undermining racism. At creation, all of us in his image. All of us in his image. Cataclysmic implications of human beings in the image of God. Every kind of human being. Second, sin and fall. We are one in our corruption. We are deep in solidarity in sin. You are so sinful, and I am so sinful, we're right there together. There is no exalting of another above another if we are both dead, bent, rebels together on our way to hell. How vain is the exaltation of self-sinner over another sinner. Third, the cross. Christ died to reconcile us both, talking about Jews and Gentiles at that moment, in one body to the cross, to Christ through the cross, to God. Or, you were slain, we say to Jesus in Revelation 5:9. You were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and made them a kingdom, and priests, one priesthood to our God. This is why I said it's more than a social issue. Whenever I get to talk on this, I want to say to all conservative white folks who fear the social gospel, it's not a social issue. It's a blood issue. By your blood you ransomed them, all of them. You died to pull them together. Revelation 5:9. And fourth, faith. Not of works. And I think works means not only anything you do, but any distinctive you have does not commend you to God. Faith commends you to God, and faith is a desperate, I can't help myself, which puts you in line with everybody. And therefore, the way designed into the family is designed to remove all ethnic barriers. One last thing. The fact that this worldview can explain the horrors and can begin to undermine the horrors leaves you with the question, why haven't we done better than we have? Why is the Church of Christ, historically, why does it have such a mixed record on this? And I'm going to close by quoting Mark Noll in his book, Race and American Politics. And Mark is one of the most perceptive historians I know, and he argues that only Christianity, in all of its compromises with sin, can explain the compromises. I'll read this and then be done. To explain the simultaneous manifestation of superlative good and pervasive malevolence in the history of race and religion, neither simple trust in human nature nor simple cynicism about American hypocrisy is adequate. Something else must explain the pervasive commingling of opposites. That commingling has included domination with liberation, altruism with greed, self-seeking with self-sacrifice, economic independence with economic exploitation, tribalism with universalism, hatred with love. Any final explanation for the conundrums of American history must be able to account for a mind-stretching conjunction of opposites. It must evoke both the goodness of the human creation and the persistence of evil in all branches of humanity. It must show how the best human creatures are sabotaged by their own hubris, and the worst human depredations are enlightened by unexpected shafts of light. It must be able to hold these contradictions, antinomies, and paradoxes in one cohesive vision. And he says that vision is historic Christian faith. And I close with this. From the much used and much abused scriptures, a long line of Christian readers have affirmed in various accents and diverse emphases a transcendent account for profound complexity to take the measure of human nature and human achievement. God made humans, and the creation was good. Yet at the same time, humankind is fallen and will never escape the effects of sin. Here, further, God offers in the work of his Son, Jesus Christ, and in the power of the Holy Spirit, the transforming prospect of redemption. Yet, redemption never equals perfection. The redeemed must always recognize their own shortcomings and be filled with gratitude for all the gifts of creation, including other human creatures. So the gospel is not only the promise of deliverance, the gospel is also the explanation for our failures to reach it. Thank you.
Think about it. That is available online on YouTube. You can simply Google on John Piper Speaks on Race, and there's about 22 minutes worth. That's much more in depth than what you saw with that segment. We wanted to offer that as food for thought. The last two perspectives for this section, we want to come from Pastor Lewis Rosenthal, who is the senior pastor of the McKinney First Baptist Church. And so Pastor Rosenthal, if you don't mind, come and take that second chair there and grab that second. I'll get it for you, sir. And then he will be joined by our own pastor, Pastor Sam Home, Dr. Sam Home, and he's got his mic on. Yes, good?
Yes.
All right, so give these two pastors a hand. We appreciate you guys. Talk to us.
Well, first giving honor to God, Jesus the Christ, Lord and my Savior. I never want to speak, especially in a forum like this, in my own strength, in my own energy, with my own thoughts. I want to quote something to you from I've heard many people say Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm talking about the same man, but he never wanted to be referred to as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You read his memoirs, he always stated that he wanted to be known as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The reason being is that Reverend, that portion of that title made everyone know that he was operating based on being called by God to do what he was doing. And here's a quote that he said that I think is very appropriate for me sharing. My assignment was share the perspective of being an African-American pastor for a predominant African-American church. Here's a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "Who is it that is supposed to articulate the longings and aspirations of the people more than the preacher? Somehow, the preacher must have a kind of fire shut up in bones." You know he's a preacher right now because you know he's talking about Jeremiah right here. And he says, "Whenever injustice is around, he tell it." So as a pastor, African-American pastor of a predominant African-American church, as we are looking at the issue of racism and the legal system, for me as the pastor of the McKinney First Baptist Church, one of the most important tasks I believe God would have me to do and be engaged in is that I need to know who is the chief of police in the city of which I pastor. And what I need to do is I need to formulate a relationship with him that is one based on me being a prayer partner for and with him. I heard one of the officers come up and he made the statement. He said one word. And when he said that one phrase, rather, it reminded me of every prayer I think I've ever prayed. When I get the opportunity, I go quarterly and I pray with Chief Connolly and every other police officer who will allow, as well as our fire department. It is the responsibility of God's called out pastors to go stand in the gap for the people who are supposed to be looking out for the communities. And when I pray for the police officers, one thing I always pray for is, Lord, grant them split-second wisdom and grace. Because it's a split second, as we heard one of the officers state, between when they get out of the car and they approach that person, it could be a split second that could determine life or death. And I believe that if we meaning all who know Jesus as Lord and Savior, if we begin expanding our prayers beyond praying for the obvious things that we need in our life, and began praying for our police department. I know I'm African American. I don't have to tell you, I don't have to guess about how difficult life has been. I am African American. I've lived it for 56 years. The only time in McKinney I've ever been afraid in my life, and I never forget the look on my wife's face. I forgot my wallet. I was looking around in the house looking for it. Where's my wallet? I got all my kids going around looking for it. And all of a sudden, I remembered. I paid a bill. I used my credit card. I left my wallet in the office. It's Thursday. I'm off on Friday. I got to have it for Friday. I'm not going to be I might be at the church on that Saturday morning. And I told my wife, I got to drive to the church to go get my wallet. This was about 10:30 at night. And the look on her face of just stoic fear to say, what if you get stopped? What could happen to you? And at first, I wasn't worried about that. Like, Pastor Louis Rosenthal, I'm going to tell him who I am. Then I thought about it as I was driving, all the people who some significant, terrible things have happened to. And all of a sudden, I started thinking, oh, Lord, what if I get the 1 out of 100 that isn't like every other police that I've met in McKinney? And I give our chief, Greg Conley, credit for being one who knows the Lord and who stands for justice. And the fact that one of the things I had been praying for when I first became pastor is something that I see exists today, and that's that police advisory council. Because the police department needs the faith community alongside it to be able to help them to understand the plight of the people. And having some type of advisory committee, and everybody in it doesn't have to be a member of a church or a pastor, etc. Like Leroy is one, and Bruce Miller is another, and Carol Wood is another, that are ministers. But they are able to help the police understand better the plight of people, because we pastor people. We know people. We know of the issues and the concerns that are going on. So Reverend Dr. King made it clear in his speech back in 1968 when he wrote this, that it is incumbent upon the man of God or the woman of God to be able to be the one that when things are not the way it's supposed to be, they got to go tell it. I say this to you. Be like Sister Armstrong. I'm going to give a homework assignment or two too. You cannot no longer in this day and age, because normal is gone, and I pray normal never come back. We're in a new normal. We're living that part of Isaiah 43:19 that talks about, and God says he's going to do a new thing. Well, he's doing it whether we recognize it or not. And one of those new things we got to now start doing is we can't be, when I say we, the we I'm talking about here is people who don't look like me. You can no longer be silent when you see blatant racist activities and discrimination take place right in front of you, and you just simply be silent and say it's not none of your business. Right. That day is long gone. That day is one of the reasons why so many protests are going on today, is the silence, not just of people who don't look like us, but I'm just saying the silence of people who see things wrong, see racist activities, and will not open up their mouths. That's what Dr. King was talking about. He said the responsibility first starts with the man of God, starts with the preacher. So I say to you, as it relates to the law enforcement, I look at what is happening. Now, just because we in McKinney don't have the same kinds of issues going on today that we see going on in a whole lot of other places, that's wonderful. That speaks of the fact of folk that are praying with the chief. It speaks of the quality of the man that our chief is. It speaks of the advisory council. It speaks of, in this area, there is a covering around these officers like I believe in few other places in the country. I personally, as the man of God, pray with police chief, with our police chief and every officer, have been doing it for 3.5 years. I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I say it in response to what I've read long time ago from what Dr. King said. Racism is real. It's an uncomfortable subject. Nobody really likes talking about it, but it's real. We've been living it, those of us who are African American, for as long as we've been alive. Thank you, my brother. But the one thing that will break it, there's two scriptures. And I'm going to leave you with that. You know I'm a preacher, so a preacher better be going to the word. First is 2 Chronicles 7:14. Oh, we quote it, but oh, what would happen if we actually lived it? If my people, as I would say if I was at TMFBC right now, if you had one of those good Bibles, that "my" would be capitalized. So it's referencing God saying, if my people. In other words, if saved people who call by God's name do what? Got to humble ourselves and pray. Then we got to seek his face. That means we got to read this book and sit in front of it and be able to have the Lord speak to us. And when the Lord is speaking to us, he's going to tell us that we got to pray for our police officers. Anybody can complain about what's going on. Anybody can say this and this or that is not happening. My question to you is, are you praying for them? Are you standing in the gap for them? Because I know this. In the name of Jesus, there is power that can transform life. I don't care how much training a police officer has. If there is no power that is coming from the Lord Jesus that is working and moving in that department, you will not see the transformational change that is needed. That's why it's our responsibility to do that. Because it's the conditional promise. It says if we humble ourselves and pray, seek God's face, turn from our wicked ways, then God says he'll hear from heaven, meaning he'll hear our prayers, forgive our sin, then heal our land. We need a healing. We need a healing in our judicial system. It's broken in America, and we need to be comfortable saying that it's broken in America. And because you can't get to the solution of a problem until you first identify what the problem is. Then we've got to realize love conquers hate. All the training in the world, until people see other people as being made in the image of God, fearfully and wonderfully made, they can be the most well-trained individual on planet Earth. But when push comes to shove, in that split second, who they really are, what is really working in them is going to show up and show out. Therefore, I conclude with that with this passage from 1 Corinthians. it says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but not have love, I become a sounding brass or clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I'm nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but not have love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long. It's kind. Love doesn't envy. Love doesn't parade itself. It's not puffed up. Doesn't behave rudely. Does not seek its own. Is not provoked. Thinks no evil. Does not rejoice in iniquity. We can't look at. We saw 3 officers watching a man on another man's neck saying, I can't breathe. That reflected no love for another human being, that you can sit there and you could have made a difference. No, love rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, but whether they are prophecies, they'll fail. Whether they are tongues, they will cease. Whether they are knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love. These 3, but the greatest of these is love. That's right. The brother said, what do? We stop being silent when blatant, discriminatory, racist activities are happening right before us. The new normal says we got to speak out against it. You've got to pray. As it relates to the police officers, we got to pray for that split-second wisdom, split-second grace. And then you got to strive to get to know someone who doesn't look just like you. When you strive to get to know somebody who doesn't look like you, you will better understand what's going on with them, to better understand how others view life. For many people, they see the police and see a siren and they just wonder, ooh, what's going on? For others, if they see a police and hear a siren, there's a fear, there's a panic. There's something that comes over them because of past experience. If you get pulled over today, the majority of people who don't look like me, you're not worried about it. You're going to pull your wallet out. You're going to pull your driver's license out. You're not thinking twice of it. You knew if you were speeding or whatever the case may be. But for some of us, now if I'm in McKinney around Chief Conley and the good police officer here in McKinney, I might feel a little better. But I know what it's like. I know what it's like to drive my car. Bought a brand new 2000 Escalator. I almost had a hatred for police after this event. My baby, my daughter at that time, Raylan, was just born. We were on our way home, let our family see our baby. We got there. It didn't happen until I got into Louisiana. I got stopped at least 4 times between the Texas border and Alexandria, and then another 3 to 4 times on my way back. Ask me, were you speeding? No. I got stopped just simply because I was an African-American male driving a brand new Cadillac Escalade. And it put I'm not going to say a hatred, but it put a spot on me that it took this getting deeper in this word to understand that was something that was beyond me. I say this just to say to you that you got to understand what it's like to be in our shoes for a little while, to where you understand that the protests and the things that are going on, they're real for us. Let me shut up because I'm probably at 7 minutes by now.
Yeah.
10 more seconds. Leroy knew when he put a mic in a pastor's hand, he knew what was going to happen. So obviously he got some extra time laid out.
My parents recently gave me a few boxes for my childhood. And in the boxes from my childhood were my favorite toys. And one of those boxes were micro machines. Did anybody ever know what those are? Anymore? They're little bitty cars. And in those boxes of micro machines, there were 3 that I had in a special place because they were my favorite ones. And one of those micro machines was a police car. And it reminded me, and I played with my girls, that I grew up idolizing police officers. Like I wanted to be a police officer. Today, when police officers are around, I feel safer. And on some level, I still idolize police officers. And I would say in a lot of levels. As I'm seeking right now to listen, the stories that Lewis just shared, the story of getting pulled over and over and over and over and over again, driving his new Escalade. That was before you were a pastor, by the way. Yeah, way back. I was trying to how do I even put that into context? Like, how do I even really hear that? And I thought, I don't know, but maybe, what if in school for me growing up, I had multiple different teachers taking me out of class saying, you cheated on this test. There's no way, you're not smart enough for this test. And to think, like just trying to enter in, to try to really listen to that's painful. There's a reality. As I listen to people in our church, okay, listen, this is people in our church. In our square, walking from the restaurant to the car, and someone in front of them recognizing that there was an African American behind them running away because they were an African American at night. In our church, African American couple who's in a life group with others that aren't African Americans, trying to bring up this issue that this is not okay, getting blank stares from their life group and not interacting around the issue. That would be painful to me. As I seek to listen, I've heard a lot of Anglos respond with the other statistics. Right? I almost feel like we fight back with stats. Okay, well, let's talk about, here's this stat or this stat. And then I heard someone, the art of originality is forgetting your source. I'm sure I heard this from somewhere, but I heard someone give the illustration. If you had a neighbor come knock on your door and say, my house is on fire, and you were to say, hey, and my garage is messed up too. Why don't you come check out my garage? That's not love, right? How do we hear right now that, okay, and I love, Rick, you were saying there's a character issue. Okay, this happened to me on Thursday as I'm trying to listen right now. I had a letter, and Janina's letter was much better than mine, so I'm going to let Janina's be the red letter. You want me to I'm going to read a portion of it here in a second. But we were at the prayer meeting that we had for Collin County. And one of the police officers said to me before we started, he said, I just wish all of these people knew how much I love them. And Leroy pointed out, not every police officer believes that, right? Or what happened with George Floyd would not have happened, right? There was a character issue. And by the way, I've talked to multiple police officers through this that have said no one has condoned what happened in that incident. That was evil, okay? But as he said that, and I watch over here, we've got all of these pastors also on one side and police officers on another side, and I'm sitting there thinking, you know what makes me really upset? When I see a man or a woman mishandle the position of pastor. and to use this position to elevate themselves or push other people down and to hurt people. And I'm like, that is not okay. And that happens because apart from the grace of Christ, the gospel, the work of the Holy Spirit in my life, I'm a bad apple, okay? But I'm looking at those police officers and the pastors, and I'm thinking, are there some bad apples in the pastor group? Maybe so. The churches need to do something about those bad apples, right? And there are a lot of churches that actually have structures in place. Our church, not long ago, this is before I came, they changed this, so y'all, good. There's hope for y'all. Y'all can get rid of me. But there used to be at our church this policy in place that required a 75% vote from the congregation for any minister to be removed. Like that's, and so there are good, helpful unions in our country, but I think it actually ends up hurting in the long run a lot of police officers, because if it keeps someone that's not in character there can be trouble, right? And so what does it look like? One of the things that I've been hearing often, and one of the reasons because Leroy speaks this into me, is that and we're going to talk about this with the chief here in a minute, is there's a beauty to policing in the United States, and that is it's local control, like that we can do something about what's going on. And the same thing for the church, right? So I'm relating to the church. I'm a pastor. I'm not blasting pastors. I'm definitely not blasting police officers. I believe that most, not all, but most police officers are in their role because they love people and they want to help people. I believe that. Okay, I believe most pastors, not all, and we've got to get rid of those. We've got to get the pastors that are not in it for the right reasons out of that role. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'll say this and then I'll turn it over to Leroy. We must condemn and bring justice to anyone who mistreats others because of their race. That's not okay. We must honor and support the good police officers that daily lay down their lives to protect us. We must do both. And if we're not careful right now, something's going to happen in our country where we're not going to help racism, we're not going to help policing. We're just going to fight each other. Or we can work together and we're going to overcome through the gospel of Jesus Christ this racism issue, and we're going to make the police force stronger than it even already is. And I think it's going to be a beautiful thing, okay? So to get more specific, okay, I've been saying to Leroy, that's not okay, this is okay, that's not okay. And he's like, you just need to say that out loud. So here we go. It is not okay for police officers to use unnecessary force to arrest people of any color. Not okay. It is okay for police officers to use necessary force to arrest people of any color. They have to, right? It is not okay for police. Before I even finish this, please give me grace. I realize that nothing I say right now is going to make everyone happy. In fact, it's going to upset everyone in the room, right? It's not okay for people to lawlessly commit acts of violence, looting, or destruction of property. Okay? Violence is not the answer. Now, there's something under that anger that comes from a real pain that's real and not okay. It is okay for people to peacefully protest for positive change in our democracy. Silence is not the answer, like you were just saying, right? Silence is not the answer. Okay. It is not okay when the judicial system disproportionately fails to deliver needed justice for people of color. It is okay for good-willed people to pursue equal justice for all citizens of America. It is not okay for the sin of racism to continue damaging our country, and it's especially not okay for Christians who believe in Jesus to practice racism against any other person based on the color of their skin or ethnic origin. Racism is, you've heard us say this if you were at the prayer gathering, not a skin issue, it's a sin issue. Christians, and there are people who claim the name of Christ who are acting out right now, either in ignorance or in anger, racially wrong. Practicing, racism. Okay, that's not okay. It is okay for Christians to, and this is along what you just said, Lewis, for Christians to engage in loving, honest conversation with others in the family of God who are different from them and extend grace when things aren't said perfectly, and to seek to learn from the other person. And so we've got to do what we're doing now. And Leroy, I think, is going to help us after talking with Police Chief Connolly here in just a second. about maybe what are some steps that we can take to move towards each other in this. So, yes, good. There's more I could read there, but I'm going to stop. All right, there's more time. It's 5:26. Come on up, Leroy. Yep.
We're inviting Chief Conley to come. Thanks to Pastor Louis Rosenthal. One more hand for Pastor Rosenthal and for our pastor, Pastor Sam Holm. Chief, come on up. Good to see you. Have to remember, yeah. Okay, so let's grab this mic for you, Chief. And this is Chief Greg Conley, who has been on the force since 2015, about April. Came from outside of the department. And Chief, I'm going to ask you a question that maybe no one's asked you. So we're going to go back here in McKinney to 2015 June. You heard Janina allude to it. June 5, there was an incident at Craig Ranch. We won't spend a lot of time on that. We know that story, where a McKinney police officer body slammed an African-American teenage girl. That's not okay. This chief had been on the job for 2 months. He came from outside the department. So, Chief, here's the first question I want to ask you. When you got the word that one of your officers was out of control at Craig Ranch, how did you feel?
Certainly not good. I'd actually been on the job 5 weeks and was just trying to get to know the department, get to know what was going on. Of course, Leroy, in our working together, you know a lot of the backstory on that. Actually, on Friday night, I heard about this incident. And the officer was, you need it closer? Yes. Okay. The officer was, Case Bolt, actually went to the hospital that night. He was having some kind of physical reaction. So when I heard he was in the hospital, I went up to see him. There was a sergeant there, and I said, what happened? And it was related to me as well. It was just a disturbance with some teenagers, and a few of them got out of hand, and we ended up just calling the parents and sending everybody home. Well, that's not abnormal, that's just everyday police stuff. And so I left that evening, and all day Saturday, I'm working in the garage because we had just got in a new house. Well, that morning I got a text message that said, they're talking about a video out here that may be bad. I said, well, find it and get it to me so I can know what's going on. And they said, well, we can't find it. I'm not sure why they couldn't find it. Apparently everybody else in the country was finding it. So I continued to work in the garage. And then that afternoon, about 3 o'clock, I got a phone call that said, hey, we found it and it's not good. I said, okay, let me see it. So when I saw it, I knew that we had a problem. And I called everybody in that evening and I said, this is going to be a very big deal. I asked Officer Casebolt to come in. Immediately we suspended him. I told him, this is going to be big, and he was oblivious to it at the time, did not realize how big that was going to be. And I said, we'll be concerned about your safety, but this is a big problem. And you're suspended from the force. And we'll be dealing with this on Monday, because this was late Saturday night and we were trying to beat the news cycle. We wanted to try to get out in front of it as best we could. In today's age of social media, you can't get out in front of anything really, but we were still working on trying to get in the news cycle. It did not get carried locally that evening. The next morning, on Sunday morning, we called a press conference, had everybody come in. That was my first thing, and it just snowballed from there. But it was certainly a watershed moment for us. Nobody lets us forget it, but honestly, I'm not sure we should forget it, right? We need to remember. But we've done so many things since that time, and we've learned a lot and grown a lot, and I think Leroy's probably going to want to take it from there.
And that's really the focus of this time, is to talk about what has been done, because we had a problem. Fortunately, that incident did not result in the death of a person, but it was certainly fits in the same category of excessive force. And so that was a problem, and this chief was new on the job. We hosted here at our church, some of you might remember, we hosted on Father's Day 2015 a Heal McKinney service. Chief was here, our elected officials, lots of people were here. I went up to this chief afterwards, and I said to him, I said, "You don't know me, it doesn't matter who I am, I just want to challenge you to clean up this department and do whatever you need to. Don't hide anything, just clean house." And that was all I said, and I left. Months later, I get a letter from Chief Connolly saying, "I'm forming a community advisory council, and I want you to serve on it." And that's where we want to take it from there, Chief, is you have taken the initiative to make several positive changes in our department that has brought us to where we are today. And if you would, think about them from the perspective of policies. I can tell you, I knew he was serious. Now, honestly, when he asked me to serve on the council, I told Janina, I said, "I think he's calling my bluff, and I better step up and serve." And I knew he was serious when the first assignment he gave us was to revise the department's policy on the use of force. I knew he meant business. So, Chief, talk to us about what has happened in McKinney with policies, with personnel, and with practices. What has been going on that has been such a positive thing?
Well, I think, coming in from that time, I knew that we needed to do some things in the department. We had a long way to go, and I was going to need some help, hence the advisory council and other things we've put in place. I also knew that it was going to be very difficult for me as a brand new chief, because I didn't have the credibility with the officers either. They don't know me, the community doesn't know me. In some ways that was helpful, because people would say, "Well, he just got here." Had it been a few years after I'd been here, I wouldn't be able to use that excuse. I wouldn't say, "Well, that was his problem, the guy before me." But it did give me an opportunity, and I realized this is an opportunity to step in and to try to make a real positive change and difference. I met with every officer afterwards, and they didn't, not everybody that was there agreed with me. But I told them this was wrong, and we can't do these things. And here's my expectations. These are the things that we're going to expect. This is the type of department we're going to be. And we had a motto. I inherited the motto, but I said, I really believe in it, and I'm going to hold you to those standards. Our motto is do the right thing, do the best you can do, and treat people the way you want to be treated. And I went through each one of those and the underlying values that are there. And I said, that's who we are. That's what policing should be all about. And I began this series of talking. Every time I talk to the officers, we talk values. We talk about who you are. And I had a lady the other day call me and talk about the big picture in the country. And as we were talking, I kind of chuckled, and she said, "Well, you don't sound like you believe me." I'm like, no, I believe you. I don't know that I can fix the big picture in the country. I said, but when it comes to the police department, I said, when we talk to the officers, I try to reach each one of them at the level of their heart. Who are they? Ask yourself who you are and what you're all about and what do you stand for. Because if I can get them on board with that, on board with the values, on board with the change of heart, and to look at yourself and to understand the essential humanity in each person that we contact, then that's what's going to make a difference. So we got started with the advisory council.
Harvey's over here, fellow member of the...
Harvey Oaxaca. And what I did is I just met people. You can imagine with all that, I'm starting to meet so many people in McKinney. Leroy came up to me and other people, and I said, we're putting this group together. And I sent out letters to people that I had met. I also said, who do you know? That's how I got to know Harvey. I asked other people, I said, who would be good for this group? And his name was brought up. So I sent him a letter, said, hey, I'd like you to be a part of this. It's been a very positive thing for the police department. Some people will say, oh, you're just yes people. And they're really not. They challenge me. They will take issue with me. They will correct some thinking. But they truly have been a blessing to me as we've looked at policies, procedures. How are we doing things? Are we doing it the very best way possible? And does everything we do uphold those underlying values of who we are as a people, as a profession?
So, Chief, you focused intentionally on changing the makeup of the department so that it looks more like the citizens in McKinney. Talk about that some.
Okay. So one of the first things I did, I said, we've got to diversify our department. We had some minority officers. I said, but it's important for us to reach out. And so every recruiting effort that we have is focused on hiring minority officers. What I told my recruiting staff, I said, the white males are going to show up to take the test. They're coming. Okay? But we've got to increase the pool of minority officers, and I want that to be your focus. And so for the last 4 years now, we've been able in our hiring to hire about 40% or more minority and female hiring since we've been there. So that was a significant initiative to make that a focus also in our hiring.
Yeah, so cool, so cool. So we worked on this policy on the excessive force. You brought us the policy on bereavement, how the officers deal when somebody dies and they have to go and notify the next of kin. Somewhere around 2016, 2017, you brought to us in the council an initiative that you felt like would take the department to a whole new level with certification. Talk to us about CALEA certification.
Only 5% of police agencies in the United States are nationally accredited. To be CALEA accredited, you have to pass, I think it's 435 different standards. They look at all of your policies, your procedures. Are you truly following all the best practices in the industry? You know, policing's not the same everywhere. I know you probably want to talk about that a little bit, but I told people at the time, and I remember sitting here at First McKinney, not in this auditorium, but we had a meeting over here. And I said, the big thing is to remember is we're the McKinney Police Department. We're your police department. You need to have influence and control and understand you know, you're the ones who are important here. I can't fix everywhere. If I could fix other places, I would, but this is where God's put me right now. And so it's my job to be here and do the very best that we can in this place.
So for those who are not familiar with CALEA, you said only 5% of all departments in the United States, and it's C-A-L-E-A.
Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies.
CALEA.org. Go check it out. You can fact check us. We invite that. If you go there and you do a search by states and put in Texas and search for the departments throughout the entire state of Texas, the Longhorn, Lone Star State, there are 24 departments that have CALEA accreditation. 24 out of all the departments in the state of Texas. And our McKinney department is one of those. In Collin County, we have 3, right?
Yes.
Our city, McKinney, Frisco, and Plano are all CALEA accredited. So we got that accreditation in 2017, and you have to re-up every 3 years. So this is 2020. So we've just are still going through.
We just finished our assessment with the assessors again.
Just finished. So part of that was they had to talk to people in the community. Chief asked me to be one of them. I had an hour-and-a-half conversation with the accreditor who was assigned to us, a former police chief in North Carolina who now lives in the state of Utah. I asked him this question: Dave, if the Minneapolis Police Department had had CALEA certification, could it have prevented the death of George Floyd? He said without hesitation, absolutely yes. He said because there are certain standards that CALEA requires on a department so that you have a better chance of weeding out the few bad apples, because you can't maintain your accreditation if you don't. So the tech team's going to put on the screen, there's a slide, and it was this chief who I first heard this quote from. We were doing our first community forum in 2016, a year later after Craig Ranch. So we were excited about giving a report on some initial progress. And when Chief was making his presentation, here's the quote that he made: "The genius of American policing is local government control." And he was quoting George Keeling, just died last year. American criminologist, professor, his list is long. Just look him up, Google on him. And it clicked for me, and I want this to click for all of us. The genius of policing in America is local control. Therefore, if we are to improve policing in America, yes, it would be great if at a federal level we had policies coming down. That would be great. It would be great if at a state level we had state legislators and governor who were behind positive policing. It'd be great. But here's what we have to have for policing to change in America is local involvement, one city at a time. And this chief opened the door for us here in McKinney to come to the table and to sit there with him. Somebody asked me about a year ago, they said, "So are you like climbing the ladder? You're going to go to the Mayor's Advisory Council next?" I said, "I have no interest in being a part of the Mayor's Advisory Council." My wife will verify. I said, "My interest is to continue to serve with Chief Connolly because I want to be at the table to help prevent any more instances that come even close to Craig Ranch." All of us that are watching online, all of us that are here, we have friends in different parts of this country. And we have to get this message out. We have to educate our friends that policing will change when it changes on a local level. And that means you and I have a great possibility for making a difference, because we can plug in with the chief and his boss, city manager, and his boss's bosses, the council, and require, demand that we have a police force who protects and serves all the citizens. Talk to us, Chief.
You know, when we talk policies, we're getting so many emails and phone calls and stuff right now. Do you have this policy? We've got them all. We're very progressive in our policies. It gets tedious sometimes trying to explain that to people, but we get lumped in with everybody else. You hear these people, now they're going to institute this policy. We've had that policy for years. Duty to intervene when you see someone doing something wrong. We trained, as you know, we trained in a code phrase or a code word for officers, and we've been doing this for at least 4 years now, 4.5. We train them in a code phrase that if you see somebody doing something, well, don't wait until the man's down on another man's neck for a long time. Step in. When you see somebody losing control, somebody doing something that's wrong, you have a duty to step in. And we gave them a phrase to say. If I see Leroy starting to get a little too worked up, I'm not going to tell you what the phrase is, but it's something only he and I would know. It wouldn't necessarily embarrass him in front of everybody, but it would tell him, I'm stepping in, you need to step back. And we've been training that for a number of years now. And it's like, yeah, we're there. We understand that. We want to hire the very best people. You can't policy what's in people's hearts. And I appreciate the former officer saying, hire the best. The thing that scares me the most is, are the best going to want to even come into this profession nowadays? But it's important that we hire high quality people and that we hold them to that very high standard. Okay. We hire good people. It's not easy to get into the McKinney Police Department. If you come from another part of the country, we go where you came from. We have people fly all over. You don't get to just come in here. We're going to find out about you, and we're going to go visit, and we're going to talk to everybody who knows you, not just the people you put down on your list. We're going to find out about you because we don't want you to be here if you're not the quality person that we're looking for. And if you're not that person that we're looking for and you come in and we find that out, then we're going to ask you to leave. And that's really the bottom line on it. You know, when I hear stories like Pastor Rosenthal, to think about, why should you be afraid to go out at 10:30 at night? That's ridiculous. And so that hurts me to hear that because I think, you guys are my friends. You pray for me, you pray with me. That should not be.
Yeah. So good. Are you getting the picture? They're going to put up on the screen, we have 2 slides of some suggested next steps, some resources to help you. We must engage on a local level all across this country to change policing in America. It is possible. It is possible for us to do this. Will it happen overnight? No. But we're 5 years. From June of 2015, we are 5 years removed from our embarrassment through Craig Ranch. And now we're all excited and we're happy. And I personally am far more comfortable. And I talk about this department to my friends in other cities. You need to get engaged on a local level. So one of those, a couple of books. These are 2 books that will challenge your thinking. Okay, and as believers in Christ, we're thinking people. We're not afraid of that. So pick up these 2 books. One of them is hard to get right now, White Fragility. It's out of stock continuously, so be patient. Get it on order on Amazon, and you'll get it eventually. And then How to Be an Anti-Racist. The next slide gives you 2 resources. Take a picture of it, and you'll Google on these resources. One is President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. It's a 116-page report. And a companion to it is another report. It's called The New Era of Public Safety Toolkit. Google on these. You'll find them. They're PDFs. Download it and share these. Share it. We have to become a part of the change that we want to see. And you can raise the protest, and we should. That's a part of our democracy, the freedom to raise peaceful protests, to advocate for change. That's happening right now. At the end of the day, for it to change, it's going to change in McKinney, and Anna, and Melissa, and Allen, Plano, and Frisco. It's going to change one city at a time. Because concerned men and women say, I'm willing to get involved. You may not be the one who serves on an advisory council or citizens committee, whatever the name is. I don't care about the name, it's the function. That you have a chief who opens the door for people to come in with transparency, with accountability. Whenever we ask this chief to do something and bring us a report in our monthly meetings, he is Johnny on the spot. I'll close with this, and then Harvey's here, and so if Harvey, if there's something you want to add, we want to give you that opportunity. But our very last meeting was last month, May. The chief said to us, because CALEA's certification requires hours and hours of training. And so he said, I want to use you guys as guinea pigs. So I'm going to show you some training that we're rolling out in the department, and talk about that training, chief.
We have tons of training. We've done, and I want to mention real quickly, so we don't miss the community programs. We've done neighborhood police officers saying we've got to get connected with the community, focusing initially on the historic minority neighborhoods. So we do tons of stuff out in the community, various meetings, the community forums, tacos with cops, coffee with cops. all kinds of things to get out there and get to meet people and build relationships. That's so very important. But one thing that we have to deal with in that vein is we get to know one another. As we get to know one another, trust is built. But we also have to understand ourselves. We all carry biases with us. We don't see overt racism at the McKinney Police Department. If we did or do, it's gone. That person does not stay around. We examine everything about that person before they come in. Every social media post we can find, everything we can find out. We're not going to hire someone like that. But the problem is all of us are people, and all of us carry biases with us. So we've brought in what we call an implicit bias training. And it was very well received by the advisory council, and they said, you've got to take this show on the road. You've got to go to the public. Well, a big part of that is going out in the public and training it and saying, this is what we're teaching our officers. You don't get the full dose of it, but it's to understand what we're teaching, what we're training. And that again speaks back to that time of, if I went into every police officer that I know and said, is racism wrong? They would say yes, absolutely. But that's on an outward level. That's looking outside. And what we're trying to do is get them to look back inside. What's in your heart? What do you think? And so that's a big part of this training, is causing that introspection of, what are my biases? What am I carrying with me?
What else would you like to say to us, Chief? We've got people watching online, those that are here. Anything else you'd like us to know?
You know, we deal as police officers, we're human beings. And just like Pastor Sam said, there's bad ministers, there's bad doctors. But one thing about bad police officers is they carry the force of the state. Okay? If you're a bad minister, you can't take away my liberty. I may just not like you very much, or you may do something really terrible, but we carry the force of the state. And we've got to always be cognizant of that. We're not going to be perfect because we're human. We're just human beings. And there has to be an understanding of, we're doing the best we can. When there's a problem, though, we need to correct it. We need to be working together to make improvements. Because the only way we're going to improve is when we're working together, when we're both committed to the same goal, to the same propositions. And then when we see that we're not meeting up to that, we can take and we can change that and we can fix it. Beautiful.
Can we appreciate the chief we have here in McKinney, Chief Greg Connolly? Wonderful, wonderful. If you guys would put that slide up about the genius of American policing, just so it resonates one more time as we head for close here. We thank you for your involvement today in this town hall. Our goal is to offer practical patterns for progress, not just to talk about it, but to be about it. And we've been about it in McKinney. And our model here, it's not a perfect model, but it is a model, and it is a good model. And it's a model that can be deployed city by city across this nation to bring about the kind of change in policing and local law enforcement that we all want to see, so that the majority great cops who are in every department do not get labeled because of one or two bad apples. So thank you for being present today. Our pastor is going to come. I want him to come and close us out. We're going to end. We talked today about proceeding with prayer, not just beginning with prayer, but continuing and ending with prayer. So he's going to give us any closing comments and pray us out of here. By the way, Carla, would you stand, please? We want to recognize Carla. That's Harvey over there, member of our advisory council. And then Carla behind him. Carla is with the McKinney PD. She's head of communications, so you saw her moving about, taking some pictures. She wants to help tell this great story. That's her job with the police department. Pastor.
Thank you, Leroy. Thank you for all who've been part tonight, especially thank you, Chief Connolly. I'm thankful that God has placed you in our city right now to help lead. I want to say thank you to Louis Rosenthal, great friend, partner in ministry, and the McKinney First, for your allowing for us to serve with you and be part of what God's doing in and through you. And thank you for joining us, many of you, and some of you online for our town hall today. I love all that has been discussed, and I'm sure that you didn't like all of it and that you disagree with some of it, but listening is important, right? As we listen, things change in us. I remember 7 years ago, significant thing happened. I watched the movie Selma, and I was wrestling with why do African Americans view police officers differently than me? I told you my background. And watching after the movie, I was like, if that's the story my dad told me, I would respond differently. And that we need to listen to each other. We need to listen to each other. And I love, Janina, you brought up the story of the Good Samaritan. We need to love people well. A few weeks ago in our church, I got to preach through the story of the Good Samaritan. And one of the things that jumped out to me was what changed it for him was compassion, which is a felt need that moves to deeds. It's an emotion that moves into an action. And that compassion prompted him to go to the other side of the road. And proximity is required if we're going to really listen to other people. And so as Leroy and I have been talking, and other pastors in our city have been talking, Lewis was part also with our prayer gathering this Thursday night. One of the things that we want to challenge you to do is to sit across the table from someone who looks different than you. And so specifically, we've said on the 5th, I was going to say Wednesday, 5th Sunday. Yeah, Saturday before the 5th Sunday. On the next one that actually comes is in August. We want to challenge you to invite someone over for dinner, or if it's still COVID when August hits, or you can start this weekend, do it on Instagram. Why can I not say anything right now? Zoom. Thank you. You can have a Zoom meeting. I'm really tech savvy. You can ask my last few Zoom meetings I've tried to lead. You do it on Zoom, whatever, but to look for an opportunity for you to continue to do what we're doing in this room, but more on an interpersonal level. We need those moments. We need the moments like, and I need more moments where I'm right here in my life, and I really do. I need more moments like that in my life, and I'm going to think a lot about that, Lewis, and listening to what you have spoken into me today, but. So we're going to do that. Lewis and I have already talked about if there are dates that we can arrange that with our families. We've actually been talking that for like 2 years. We've gotten together personally, but we've tried to get our wives involved. My wife, by the way, I stepped out a minute ago. She called me because she thinks my daughter swallowed a coin, but she's breathing fine. She's going to get an X-ray, and so I may be richer than I knew I was, but it's going the other way quickly. So. Anyway, that was the step we had talked about. What else would you like to add to that, Leroy?
No,
Lewis
that's good.
Leroy. Yes.
Good. Yes, good. Yep.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us online. For those that are in the room, I think it's also going to be available on our website. If it's something that's been helpful for you, if something you want to re-listen to, something you want to share with a friend, let's do this together. Right? Let's listen to our right now, this time of increased sensitivity needs to move us to increased activity in a helpful way. Like, let's take advantage of this moment. God, I thank you. I thank you for those that have joined us tonight. Thank you for those that are serving us in the police force in our city. God, I pray that you'd help us take steps forward for justice, that you would help us take steps against racism. And then we recognize that happens ultimately through Jesus. It's the story of the gospel, as John Piper reminded us of as we were listening to him preach. God, we thank you that Jesus is the one who breaks down the dividing wall of hostility, that Jesus is the one who offers forgiveness to all people, that Jesus is the one who gives us the Holy Spirit that empowers us to live selflessly and not selfishly, and that Jesus is the one who changes everything. And so this, I do believe, even listen to Chief Connolly say that no one would say racism is okay, but we've got to get to work on the heart, that you are the one, through Jesus and the Holy Spirit, that can work on our hearts. So help us as churches, help us as Christians to be quick to be gracious and forgiving, but also to be quick to say, no, that's not okay, and to step into this and to help make this situation more Christ-like in our country, to make this situation different for your glory and for our good. So I ask for that in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Go love your neighbor.
That is who you are. That is who you are. Jesus.